Welcome to Slay, the podcast where we dive into all aspects of health and fitness. I'm your host, Louise Hazel, and today I'm joined by one of the most determined people I know. She's a 5-time Olympian, the most dominant snowcross rider of all time. She's a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, 1-time Olympic silver medalist, 6-time world champion, and 10 times X Games gold medalist, and the most decorated snowboarder in history. It's the unstoppable Lindsey Jacobellis. Lindsey!
Louise, thank you so much for having me today, and it's been wonderful catching up with you.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Like, I literally haven't seen you since the Olympics. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, I'm so proud. Like, I know this journey hasn't always been easy, has it for you?
It definitely hasn't. There's been the ups and downs. There's not only the losses and having to have those growth moments from deep within to really face what you're really trying to accomplish. And then you have your injuries, which any athlete knows, and how hard that is to come back from. So it's really having those reflections, looking deep within, having your, team very close to you, your friends and your family helping and supporting you to get you through that. But this was by far a journey I did not see lasting as long as it did. I never planned for it. I never planned to even be going to the Olympics. It was always this wonderful idea when I was young, like, oh my God, what if I went to the Olympics? But what sport? I don't know. I did a bunch of sports growing up, but that idea, just being like, oh my gosh, you walked in with Team USA and you were in the Olympics? Like, that's incredible.
Pretty freaking cool.
So it kind of caught me by surprise, finally making it to the Olympics, and how my sport became an Olympic sport was just not planned. So it's just kind of full adapt and pivot, which is 100% what border cross is.
Absolutely. Now, for those people at home that don't know what border cross is, give us a breakdown.
So border cross is a series of races where you take your top 16 ladies and top 32 men, and you put them into brackets of 4 or 6, depending on the venue. Sometimes we have bigger slopes to work with, and we can have 6 people racing at a time. So that's a whole nother game. And the top 2 advance to the next round. So you have your brackets that break you down to your final 4 racing for first, second, and third.
Now, I don't think I've told you this, but I've actually raced the border cross before on a television show in Great Britain called The Jump. And to stay in the competition, we had to do a ski jump. Can you believe that? But that's for another day. I can't wait to share with you my technique and my videos.
Yeah, but I know you killed it, and I know you're going to face it, and you're like, well, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going to do it, because I know that's your attitude.
I might have gone for it. Let's put it that way. And talking of going for it, I think you possibly have one of the most inspirational stories in sport that perhaps, the general public aren't yet aware of, but they will be soon. I'm sure about that. Now, I want to take you back to, I think, which is probably one of the most pivotal moments for you in your career, to Turin, the 2006 Olympics, your first Olympic Games. We watched the race today in the gym, and I'll break it down for you, and then I want you to break it down as well. So you set out of the gates. Tell us what happened next. There's 4 of you in the race. I think 3 Canadians, possibly.
It was 2 Canadians and Swiss.
Yeah, that's
Tanya
right.
Frieden, Dominique Maltese, and Maya Ricker. Mm-hmm. And it actually was considered a perfect final because we were the top 4 seeds. So everyone takes a time trial lap on the course by themselves. Nobody's there. You're just going top to bottom to find out who is the fastest. And we go through and you get your top 16 ladies, and that's how you build your brackets. Yeah. So this was a perfect final because all top seeds made it to the final.
Which is quite rare, right?
It is rare.
Because so many things can happen.
Exactly.
In the border cross, for those people aren't aware, the course banks up, there are jumps, there are so many things that could throw you off. But break down for me, talk me through the race.
Well, a little background on that day. It's not normal that we do time trials and race all in one day. That was definitely an Olympic change up because they didn't want to be breaking up and having, our event take up 2 days.
Right.
They got to cram it all into one.
Wow.
Also,
Was that a surprise to you in this particular competition, or did you know it was coming before?
we knew it was coming, but it's not necessarily something that we're
accustomed
fully prepared to, and it drains you in a different way.
Yeah.
Now we see every Olympic cycle is like that, but never any of the World Cup races still to this day, unless we're trying to sneak in a double header, which makes it it's just such a draining day. Maybe the young guns have no problem doing it, but I'll tell you, it wears me.
Absolutely.
But also prior that evening, it started nuking. There's so much new snow.
I was going to say, what's
No,
nuking?
sorry.
I'm up on my lingo,
Side note, nuking in snow world is a lot of snow.
So lots of fresh pow.
So, yes. So if you are a free rider, a free skier, you love all the fresh new snow. You want to be the first up on the mountain to experience all those fresh tracks. On a border cross course, on a downhill ski race, those are not ideal conditions. It's hard to see, and all that extra snow on top, it just completely covers all of those blue dyeing lines that help us with definition, and it becomes also a lot slower. So the speed you would necessarily need to clear certain features,
Yep, like the jumps,
are going to be drastically different.
Yeah.
So, we were supposed to have a snow seed. We didn't have a snow seed. They called it right before. So some of the top athletes didn't even qualify into the time trial rounds, which that right then and there, that ended their Olympic moment.
Yeah.
They were done. And that's pretty upsetting for those athletes because they've trained their whole life for that.
So Lindsey, you set off out the gate and there's 3 people next to you. Do you feel like you got the best start? Talk me through step by step of the race.
Well, it's been a minute since I've watched it, but from best memory, and I do break this down really well in the book because I did have to watch the race. And this was the first time I had actually watched my race.
How many times have you watched it?
Well, only now a couple of times to only write that scene to really give a good indication of what was actually happening on the course. So as best as I can remember, not reading it from the book, I did have a relatively good pull out of the gate, but I was able to generate some features right out of the start and get a good momentum going into the first turn and establish a lead. Now, this is a very long course, and this was now probably upwards of 7 runs on this course, top to bottom, and your legs definitely start to feel it. It's definitely very fatiguing to go back to back to back. And working my way down, I could hear the ladies behind me and trying to just give my best going down. And as I got down to the bottom, I ultimately didn't really remember where I was, but I'm getting excited because I know I'm getting close to the finish. And out of nowhere, I just decided to just do a grab. I went through so much therapy trying to understand what's the deep reason why I did the grab. Was I trying to be a rebel? Was I trying to I couldn't really figure out what it ultimately was. I eventually decided with my therapist that it was just this weird fluky mistake, this bad wiring scenario that just kind of went off in my brain, that I just got caught up in the moment, that I was snowboarding and having fun, realizing that the end of all this stress and this buildup was almost over.
Could you see the finish line?
I couldn't see the finish line then because of the takeoff. But I knew when I was in the air, I kind of felt, this doesn't feel right. And knowing when I landed, I was like, I am so off balance and I don't know how this is going to happen and how I'm going to pull myself out of this and falling. And then when I hit the ground, it was my back to the ground. I had that flash moment that was what did I just do?
Yeah.
This is not me. This is not, I've always been, fire away down to the finish. It was this moment that I was having this internal celebration. It just kind of came out accidentally that I was having so much fun snowboarding, because snowboarding is in itself just so much fun. It is this sport that you can express yourself, and it was just such a weird thing. And still today, I don't know what I was thinking, and I'm wondering if it's just that like immature mind and yeah.
So ultimately, you crashed. You got back up on your feet immediately, and only, in fact, 2 of the other girls had already crashed out in the race, leading one other competitor, who we see in the video comes past you. What are you thinking at that moment?
And I hadn't even known that those other girls had gone down. All of these girls were, getting hung up. Dominique, I believe, almost, clipped with me, or Tanya was almost clipping with me if you look back. But there was just, you could see the fatigue was happening in everyone. And when I got up and I crossed the finish line, I'm still baffled with myself and not understanding, what did I just do and what prompted that. I don't understand, because it was definitely not this showboating that I was showing off in any way or trying to disrespect or shove it in anyone's face. That is not the kind of individual I am. That's not the person I am. It was just all of a sudden I had this like slip of excitement at the wrong time.
Yeah. And ultimately you came away with the silver medal, and the girl behind you, who was far behind, and I watched the video today, and I'd seen it before in the past, and I felt so emotional for you, because I know how that story has come full circle. And, ultimately you took home the silver with the girl behind you taking gold. And you said the word showboating there, like, showing off rather. How does it feel as an athlete to already be disappointed, perhaps, in your own performance and what's just happened, to then have to deal with the perceptions of others and their perception of what happened? How did that idea of you showing off come about? Do you know who it was who mentioned that first? Was it a media outlet? Was it a coach?
It was definitely the media is where that was starting to spin out, because as soon as I fell and I knew I wasn't winning, I was already tearing myself apart, because I knew I made a mistake, and I'm a highly competitive person, as you are. And anytime you are doing your sport, you are dissecting it in every way to be like, how am I doing this better next time? What do I need to do? And at that time, at that moment, maybe I just had that slip that it's like, I can't dissect myself in that way. And it took so many years to have that growth and to move on from having all the people criticize me. And, it was really challenging, because it then set a certain value on myself. And every time the Olympics came up, they'd always harp on that and bring that back, and never really see how I was making these great strides within myself and the sport, because they kept just dragging me back to this moment, forcing me to relive this moment instead of allowing me to grow. And it took a long time for me to see that that was the pattern that was happening. And then I was trying to find the appropriate match for guidance so I could figure out how I could make this sustainable direction and this path to finally accepting what I did, being okay with what I did, and ultimately, even if I didn't win, that would be okay. And that took friends, that took coaches, that took, my mental coach, and that took a lot of growth, because it, as you know, it took 16 years. But even going into 2022, I had to be okay with the fact that if I didn't win, I would be okay. And even in the gate, in finals, when I'm up and the camera's right in my face and I'm trying to just be like, I'm not engaging with the camera. And then there was just that moment like, you know what? I'll smile to the camera. I'll wave. I'm a 5-time Olympian. I've done something right, and I'm in that top 4. So right now, I've done my best. And at the end of the day, it might be my day, but it might also not be my day. And I'm okay with that.
How old were you in 2006 when in Turin? Because that would have been, 16 years ago?
I think I was 19 or 20.
Yeah. You're about to embark on your book tour for Unforgiving. But my question is, who or what was unforgiving in terms of your story?
I was unforgiving to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the media was a little unforgiving to me. They were pretty harsh, and every time I felt like I was making strides to be better and I was on a roll, and especially in a buildup of an Olympic tour and getting ready to be on that stage, then all of a sudden somebody brings you back to that moment.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are we harping on this?
Yeah.
That would be if, like, you know, you were winning all of your races, you're racing the best you possibly can, and all of your combos and everything, and you're killing it with shot put and javelin, all that, and then someone's like, oh, remember when you showed up and you didn't realize you had a broken javelin, and then you threw with the broken javelin, and they constantly reminded you of it. Like,
there's, you know, the thing that's completely baffling to me is the fact that that story and that narrative would continue to follow you for all of these years. You know, pure and simply because at 19, wow, like I would give anything to go back to being 19 again,
Really?
a 19-year-old athlete, honestly, because what, you know, when you look back, you know now that you have your whole life ahead of you. So for the media to kind of tarnish you with that kind of sticker and that kind of label, knowing full well that you're a young athlete, and you know, young people every day, we make so many mistakes, and you know what I mean, we fuck up all the time. So stands to reason that this is recoverable.
And I was never given that, because as soon as I was still making those strides and having wins and being successful on the World Cup tour, they keep bringing that back. So I was constantly in this cycle of, why is it never enough? And it really messed with my value and how I viewed myself. And so every time I was going for another race, I had to win. I had to keep proving to myself. And that is so fatiguing. That is not only mentally, but it's physically fatiguing to keep that. And it's not sustainable. So.
But you did go on to win 6 world championships. 10 X Games gold medalist. So there's something within you that responded positively to that, no?
Yes and no, because I ultimately, at the bottom of my heart, love this sport, and I love that it constantly challenges me. And I was also doing it with my brother and a lot of my close teammates that knew me from a very, very young age. So it always felt like I had just had a slew of older brothers that were never letting me get away with anything. And they're like, no, just do it. You're fine. You'll be fine. Just follow us, or we're free riding. Drop this cliff. You're going to be fine. Like, don't talk back to us. We're your older brother. Just do it. Kind of mentality. And I ultimately loved when those feelings, when I would win, and I wanted it again, because that was just starting to help reinforce that self-doubt. And I'd have this great momentum and stride. And then, as you know, Olympic comes around, you have to put on your media outfit, and then you have to go face the wolves. And they're just going to ask you the questions that you know inevitably that will come up. And using that like wall and defense to how to deflect certain questions. You know, it sounds poised, it has a great delivery, but it also takes energy away from you. You know the questions are coming, you know the emotional reaction, you know how it's going to feel internally, but it still drains you. And so I was getting drained always so badly right before Olympics.
I was going to say, there were 6 world championship wins, 10 X Games wins. Do you feel like you developed an emotional block when it came to the Olympic Games?
I think there was definitely some of that emotional block, but then there was also just like bad luck sometimes. And that's how also my sport is. And if you even see how I was kind of finishing within my Olympics over those 5 years, I was always in the mix. I was always the contender. And it was just how the chips fell at that particular time. It could have easily gone that way in 2022 in Beijing. And the chips might have not fallen and the stars might not have aligned for me in that moment, in that final or in the semifinal, which was extremely hard to get into. So, you know, it's the sport, I feel, can be unforgiving. I was unforgiving to myself, and the media was definitely unforgiving. So it took a lot for my personal growth to see that from all different angles to then figure out how to grow.
Was there anything, was there one thing in terms of your personal growth that you felt helped you break through that?
I would say I ultimately had to be okay with, not winning every race. I had to then bring that to reality that, I know I have the ability to win every race does not mean I'm going to win every race.
That must have been very hard for you, Lindsey.
It was, Louise. I'm glad you recognize that.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I cannot imagine, and I'll tell you why later. You talked about the stars aligning. Now, am I right in thinking 2018 was Sochi?
Yeah, that was 14, Sochi.
Sochi.
Korea was 18.
Korea, that's right. So Korea was 18. Am I right in thinking that you brought a dog home with you from Korea?
I brought a dog home from Sochi.
Sochi.
And that was actually the character base for my children's book that I wrote during the shutdown.
Got you. So that would have been 2014?
That was in 2014, but I had that story pretty much all put together, but I didn't know anything about publishing books or how to find an illustrator. So I'm like, okay, like so many other projects we have in our life, that fell to the back burner and just lived within my, Google Docs. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll get to this one day when I have time.
I love it.
When everything got shut down, I was like, maybe I'll look around and see what this is all about and see if I can do this.
So for those of you that don't know, Lindsey actually brought home a stray dog from the Olympic Games in 2014 in Sochi.
Yep.
I've got a question for you though. So you brought home a dog from the 2014 Olympic Games, and you brought home 2 gold medals from the 2022 Olympic Games. Which one is closer to your heart?
I mean, Sochi was a very memorable moment. There was a lot of growth. Just looking back on that games, I had 2 knee surgeries that I was coming back from and started to just get my stride back in that moment. And
what were the knee surgeries?
So I tore my ACL in January of 2012 at X Games during training. I overshot the jump during testing day. Completely overshot. That is like an understatement, just overshoot. I completely overshot, and I heard the pop. So I needed to get surgery. I got surgery right away. And there was some fluky thing that happened that my graft did not take, and I had to do the surgery all over again because the doctor was saying, you can live with this. Most people can live with this type of play, but
there's a different thing between living with it and being able to compete on it
and execute and be within that 1%. And 100%. I told him, and he was like, I totally agree. Like, let's redo this. So it was a quick swap of, swapped out cadaver. I did hamstring first, but then we tried cadaver, and then there were studies that were coming out that if you were super hypermobile, that maybe your hamstring wasn't the ideal. And I was like, too late.
When you mean you tried cadaver, what does that mean?
A cadaver would be when someone passes on and they give their body to science and we can take parts from them. Somebody offered me their ACL, and it has been living healthy and living on within me. So they have helped accomplish, I don't know who you are out there, but your spirit lives on, and
absolutely,
it's going okay right now.
And a gold medalist, none other. That's amazing. Lindsey, 16 years later from your first Olympic Games, and you find yourself on the start line of the 2022 Olympic Snowboard Cross final in Beijing. What the hell is going through your mind? This is 5 years, your 5th Olympic Games.
It was actually a liberating moment because at that moment, I realized I had a 75% chance for a medal.
Woo!
And that was a pretty incredible feeling considering how many rounds we went through, because we added an extra round. We had 32 women, in the bracket where normally we have just 16. So we had a full another round. We did time trials again, all on that same day. We had an extra round and went all the way to finals. So I felt like it was just a battle right there that I won. And I was so happy to share that stage and that moment with those 3 other ladies, because we all worked so hard to get there. And it could be any one of us that could take that moment and make it their own.
Tell me about the race.
So as I'm in the gate and I'm like, I've got a 75% chance. Like, this is great. Like, and it's a long course. I'm great at drafting. Like, if I'm behind, I'll just try to pick them off one by one. Like, I have a lot of skill sets that are strong in this particular venue. So I pull out of the gate and I win the start, which is not normal for me, because as a seasoned athlete, the repetitive bounding, high explosive, it becomes more challenging as you are older. So pulled out of the gate and, kind of in the mix, but really worked the top features well. And I was in the lead. And so I was like, oh my God, the percentage just totally changed. I could be winning this. And I'm like, oh, stay focused. Basically talking to myself the entire way down.
What are you saying?
I'm basically telling myself the feature that I will be coming upon. That way I'm staying sharp, I'm staying focused and in the moment, and then I'm also trying to listen to where the ladies are behind me. Because
So a feature could be a bend, it could be a jump.
Right. So coming out of turn 1, there was a double, but I was actually pumping it. So I'm like, double pump into the next roller, then into the rollers, and then the dish, then heading down the step down and a jump. And now we're in the jump section. There's 3 more jumps and landing, quick touches and turn. And okay, everyone's going to bunch up behind me out of turn 3. We know this is the pattern. So it's going to sound like they're really loud right behind me, but don't panic. Just stay your line, stay defensive. And as I'm coming into that second to last turn and I was still holding the lead, was like, oh, it's on. Because guess what? My favorite things are coming into the home stretch.
What was coming up?
The roller sections. And it wasn't just like big rollers, it was the quick rollers.
So rollers, you kind of have to absorb the roller, right?
Yes.
So it's like a lot of flexion, a lot of like bringing almost the knees up to the chest. Am I right?
It's an entire body movement. It's fully extending your body up and then compressing down as fast as you can as you approach the apex of that roller. And then as soon as you go down, you are fully extending again and then bring yourself up. So from a start gate, when I'm just pulling up and I don't have momentum, that is a hard movement for me to do. But if I've been riding and we're coming down to the final stretches and I see those, it's almost like I get that second wind.
It's almost like the body becomes an accordion, doesn't it?
Yes.
It's nuts. Go on, take me through it.
So going through that, and I'm like, I do the rollers best in the business. I'm ripping through this. I'm not even feeling tired.
Freaking roller
That's
queen.
what I was telling myself. I'm not feeling tired. And then I'm like, and then you got the jump. And like, you basically going into my tuck into the finish. I'm saying tuck in quotations because my legs were actually very tired. And I'm basically kind of just laying my chest over my knees and trying to stay as low and balanced as possible while I coast. And then you have to like push yourself up back off of your body. And I did that big toe side turn after I realized, oh my gosh, I did it. But I didn't want to immediately go to, the big wall of media and everyone down there and all the cameras. I wanted to get away, and I needed to have that moment where I could collect myself and understand really what happened.
I've got freaking goosebumps.
So it was absolutely incredible. I can't really even explain it. It's not that it was like, oh, that you won the Olympics. It was that I never gave up on myself, and that I pushed myself, and I constantly, had so many setbacks, injuries, and mental, but I kept going. And that's the message that I ultimately want for somebody to be taking from my book, whether they're off on a new endeavor or they've been, in one for a while and they keep hitting walls and, that's the name of the game. That's what we're facing. And once I transition out of being an athlete, I'm ultimately starting from scratch, and I'm going to have those same struggles again. So I'll have to reflect back on those moments, keep grinding, keep going. Don't give up on yourself. Like let's break it down and make it simple, and let's create a structured plan.
So, Lindsey, we met on MTV's The Challenge. You puked on my plate during the eating challenge. I literally remembered this this morning.
How I won.
And yeah, exactly.
That's how I beat you in that.
Yeah, and I kind of like eliminated myself because at that point I was like, I'm not here for the stomach bile. And you and Camarion Wembley, former NFL player from the Raiders, went on to the final. Like, first and foremost, day one of the challenge, what on earth were you thinking?
I had no clue what I was getting myself into. Trying to cram a bunch of episodes and understand what this show was about, because constantly traveling, I could never really watch consistent TV. So I was never really familiar. You'd kind of hear about what the challenge was always about. And it was always like these crazy, physical challenges or mental or just a combination of the two. And I just love the fact that there was this setting being put together, that it would be the blend of the former pros on it and then also blending with professional athletes. And we were doing it for charity. And yes, there was that money on the line, but you wanted to win that money to give it to your charity. So it almost was like you were winning it in that sense, but 100%. That you wanted to be the one, that your name was attached to it, that you won it for your specific charity. So that passion definitely resonated with me 100%. And I know for others, definitely as well.
Who were you playing for?
I was ASPCA.
Mm-hmm.
I think Cara Marie was also doing ASPCA as well. So when I got runner-up and she won with her partner, it was like we kind of both won.
I love that. The challenge is a wacky television show. We were filming over the course of around about 2 weeks, wasn't it? I would
think it was 10 days, just straight up 10 days, shooting every day, and unless you were knocked out.
It was so intense.
It was high stakes, high intensity, and they have us up so early.
Yeah.
And then they have us staring at the apparatus, but while they're trying to figure out where they're setting up the cameras, our mics, what we're doing. And the previous challengers knew exactly what it was when they saw it. They're like, oh, we know how to do this. But we're sitting there like, what do you think it is? And the first couple of times, I wasted so much energy. I don't know if you had this too, but I wasted so much energy trying to figure out what I was going to do. So by the time we actually got the rules, I was so fatigued.
Yeah.
And
it was something completely the opposite.
It was completely wrong. It wasn't even close. So I learned a lot that day, and not to hype myself up visually of what I was seeing until I got the rules. Because I just felt like it was me and my brother playing when we were little, and he's constantly changing the rules. And I'm just like, I'm just going to wait.
He's making it up as he goes along.
He was, always.
Pretty much the same as the challenge then. So the interesting thing I thought about the whole event was, we were split into two teams. It was like pros versus Joes, effectively, professional athletes, and then our challenge champions. But I think it dawned on us very early, perhaps after the first event, when we kind of got played a little bit by the other team, that there was a lot more politics going on.
Yes.
And there were a couple of moments, I think, in the challenge that in the first season, because I did 2 episodes or 2 seasons, and remind us who were on the cast. There was yourself, myself, we had Gus Kenworthy,
Louis
Vito. Who else was on there? Sean Merriman, Camarion Wembley. Yeah.
We had the female basketball player.
Her name escapes me.
I need to pull up the cast.
And obviously Tia.
Yes, and Tia was there. And that was the first time I really met Tia. We just started having the same agent. So we're like, oh, cool, you're going to meet on the show.
Yeah. And so there was us thinking that we were all kind of competing against the other players, and that soon turned around and we realized we were actually competing against ourselves. And so every single time there was an elimination, we had to vote in one of our own to go into the elimination, to fight off and fend off the MTV challengers, who were the likes of CT, Wes, who else was there?
Johnny Bananas
was there. He went out early.
Cara
Maria,
Camilla,
Jordan Wisely. Wow, what a rude awakening, and what a come to Jesus moment that was. That was the moment I think I realized that Wes was a real snake and that he was playing us. And once I realized that I couldn't trust him, I was like, oh, I see how this game is played.
Absolutely.
And then we had Lolo Jones as well.
Yes.
Do you remember Limegate?
Yes.
Can you break down what happened?
So I vaguely remember. So we had lost our first challenge there for, I think it was the climbing one.
Yes.
Right? That we had to get across
Yeah.
to the safe platform. And we just had to, we all successfully made it across. I think only one of us fell.
Yeah.
But we had to, I believe, put 2 people in to the challenge
elimination
round so they could get themselves to come back. And we try to be pretty political about it. We're like, let's make this fair. You know, why don't we just kind of draw straws?
Yeah.
And we wrote everyone's name on a lime and we put it into a bowl, and you had to draw a name out.
That's true. I don't know how we ended up with, I felt like there were 2 limes in the bowl. I think it was Lolo and Tia. And I think we came to the conclusion because I can't even remember how it, anyway, long story short, I remember it was Lolo and Tia in the bucket.
Yeah, I can't fully remember, but I think we had to at least give, 1 or 2 people, but we were really trying to just be, I think, fair when that we fought so long because inevitably the challenge and the setup and everything, nothing about it was fair, but we were trying to hold on to being like the good sports, and we're going to do the right thing, and we're going to be balanced.
We're the Olympians.
Support each other. We're going to try to make like the best scene for the challenge, and it all went
tits up.
Yeah,
immediately. Yeah.
And so when you had to draw the limes out, no one actually followed up to see the name on the limes. So it still comes down to you whether it was the name or not, because you were so quick and then you dropped it down. You're like, well, I'm taking the 5th on that one.
Absolutely. I think I pled the 5th. We never quite ever found out whether the lime was truly Lolo or truly Tia. And I can reveal to you today that you're still not going to find out.
You thought you were so close.
I know.
That's got to be your intro to this. We're talking with Lindsey Jacobellis, but is the Limegate
exactly
still up?
I love it. But on you went, Lindsey, right through to the final. And what I can remember, my memory of you, this was like our first encounter, very intense over that, 10-day, 2-week period, was just what a beast you were. Like, I cannot describe to you how every single time, the camera turned on and it was time to go, you were so locked in. It was literally like as if you were on the start line of every single race you'd ever been in. And, as a competitor who's also competed at the world stage, it was fierce. And I was like, real recognized, real game recognized game. This is the person I want to do life with. Like, you know what I mean? I was like, if there's someone that I'm going to put like my life in their hands, it's going to be Lindsey. Because you're that type of person that if somehow you manage to get trapped under a bus, Lindsey would lift that bus. She'd lift that bus, move it out of the way, put you in the bus and drive you to the hospital.
Do a little DIY.
Absolutely. And drive you to the hospital. It just dawned on me that, that athlete that lives inside of you, I think we could see that in every single person, but there was just this fire and this determination and this fearlessness in you that was just so tangible and that I loved being around. Like, I really enjoyed it because I was like, yeah, that's my dog right there. I love that. And so, I was so excited to know that we would finally come back together to be working with NASAM and in the world of fitness. So talk to me about that. You have a garage. It's set up, to accommodate training. You've been personal training now for how long? And you're a qualified coach.
So during the shutdown, I took the opportunity to go back to school and do the NASM training and get my certified personal trainer, because that was potentially my fallback after the 22 Olympics. I told myself, I'm going to give this 100% all of my effort and focus. And once that's done, then it's time for me to start looking into the next venture. And, you know, this is something I've always wanted to do. And I felt personal training would be this easy transition because I'd been in fitness for decades and understanding, you know, what is required for an athlete or for someone that's trying to just live better day to day or be the recreational athlete. So during the shutdown, I was like, well, what a better time than any than just start studying and taking my test and getting certified. So it was pretty early on, and I ripped through that in like 3 months. And I think the guy at NASM was like, I'm so shocked you got through that. I was like, well, I kind of had the book a little beforehand and I was kind of like thumbing through it. But now that it was actually reality, I kind of just took that intensity that you've always seen and didn't really take my head out of the book until it was accomplished. And then started building out my garage because all the gyms were shutting down, finding what I could on Facebook Marketplace or whatever to fill the little random things that I would like or couldn't find to buy. And I just decided to do some personal training with everyone that was kind of within my complex that could walk to me, that we could be socially distancing and help me get that introduction to how I would be interacting with a client and how do we do goal setting and how we do the official assessment tests in the beginning. So it just kind of helped me get my feet wet in that. So I've been dabbling with that and staying strong. But as you know, I'm still competing full time and I've been writing this book. So
yes, you have.
I've been very busy in the last 2 years, but it's definitely something I'm keeping up on. My education, I'm looking into the women's health and fitness of all different stages of life because I feel it's been an avenue for decades that has been overlooked and how women are so different and just need those extra little tune-ups for different phases because we are very unique in certain aspects, and that's also a wonderful niche to know a lot about. And it's been a wonderful journey, and I love learning and I love challenging myself. I constantly want to push myself, and whatever situation I get into, I do put this intense pressure on myself because I never want to look back and say I could have done that better. So I get the lock-in moments where you see, and like I can't turn that off. I have calmed that over the years. It was a little even more wily.
Oh, really?
In my very young years, because my brother would definitely poke the bear on that and try to get a whole different level out of me in competition. But yeah, it's been an incredible stepping stone with knowledge, and it, you know, I love then listening to your podcast because I know exactly what you're talking about and I can back your knowledge, and I can, you know, send my clients to you to be like, look at what she's talking about. You're hearing it from me, like that you're hearing this same thing from another person. There is traction, there is knowledge, and there is science behind what these talking points are. And that's important.
Absolutely. I was going to say, what have been the challenges that you found in working with female populations?
I would say probably the biggest challenge when I'm working with women is them making themselves the priority. A lot of the times, you know, they're married, they have children, they have careers as well, but they're not actually putting themselves in that mix. They're taking care of the day-to-day, and they have the roles, and the parents have the roles, and they are setting their kids up for success. But a lot of the times, after we've done the assessment and after we are pretty much scheduling out and building what their workout program looks like, I ask them, take me through a typical day. And a lot of the times I don't hear, well, I do this for myself.
Right.
It's always like, well, we drop off this kid here. We drop off this kid here. And, you know, my husband and I will do this, and I'll, you know, go grocery shop and, or, you know, all the things that we have to do in life. But so many people don't prioritize their own health and wellness. And that could be daily meditation. So just sleeping, making sure that you are getting the required sleep you need and hydration. And then also just giving yourself time. Maybe it's 20 minutes to work out. You can still accomplish a lot in 20 minutes. Maybe it's not going to be the Olympic weightlifting workout that you're going to just crush and get those like big PR goals. And, it's hard because a lot of the times on social media, everyone sees that and they're like, if I'm working out, I should be working out at that capacity. So that's totally not obtainable. So I might as well not try.
Right.
Instead of being like, how could I fit something into my life that's going to give me that time to reflect that, that you are worth that time to prioritize yourself.
What do you do for your self-care?
I love running, depending on how my knee is feeling. But probably running and surfing are my two like favorite cardio and, opportunities. Like if I'm running, I can just be listening to music and singing in my head, and I can just kind of like go, or I can change things up and be like, oh, look, there's a stair set. I'll go do something weird and do some variations and kind of change it up. Or I'm out in the ocean, I'm floating in the water, I'm trying to chase down little corners and pop up on the surfboard and manage the crowd. It's always like a little mini border cross out there.
I was going to say, do you find that there's actually a little bit of crossover?
Absolutely.
But what is it that surfing gives you that border cross doesn't?
I would say just no impact for one. Falling in water is a lot nicer than falling on frozen snow. But I also don't have the expectation of winning. And it's easy when you're starting at that lower level and you see yourself improve those big steps. But like yourself and an athlete, when you are looking at that 1% and every day you are dissecting that 1% can drive you crazy. And you don't always get it. And it can be just frustrating and infuriating at the time. And so with surfing, I don't have that expectation. And I can't expect to be as proficient in the water and, be able to chase down the corners or compete with all the pros that are at the break as well. So I take it for what it is. And I look around and I'm like, look how many more girls are out here than 10 years ago when I just started. And it's so nice. I can smile. They smile back, where sometimes the guys are just totally focused on what they're doing. And it feels like a different community. And I like that growth. And when I'm home, it's really easy to get myself in a really healthy eating habits. I try to get the local produce and really be trying to eat as seasonal as possible. It's quite sometimes can be impossible in California because you can get fruit and vegetables
all year round, right?
When June comes around and those strawberries, I'm just like,
I love peach season.
Yes, that, and now it's plum season, and it's gonna be the apple season soon. So, trying to appreciate those different seasons as well is, I think, is important.
It's funny you mentioned seasons. When I think about female training, I almost get like one of the things that I always talk about in Slay with our female clients is to get them to understand that the body's supposed to go through seasons. If you think about the way we compete when it comes to track and field or, Winter Olympics, we go through probably like 3-month cycles, 3 or 4 month cycles. And each of those cycles are completely different. It requires a different type of training, perhaps a different type of strength work, a different type of fueling. So that's really interesting. That just kind of brought up this idea that I think as women, we really put this pressure on ourselves to be in shape all year round. And that's just simply
to
not
always
what it
live
is.
hot girl summer lifestyle. And it's just not possible.
I'm like, when's hot girl summer going to become like cute girl winter?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You need to get into the snowboard season where we got, more layers.
Yeah,
we have the buffet bars when we're on tour. So, and in my sport, it is actually better if you add a little weight to yourself because we are a downhill gliding
absolutely
sport. So I am usually heavier in the winter. And then as I come around to spring, I start to lean out and do heavy bouts of cardio. And then midsummer, I'm more into just deep strength training, hypertrophy, and then as fall comes around and we've have a really good strength base, you start moving plyometrics and moving things quickly, and that cycle just keeps continuing.
Absolutely.
I mean, I get really excited for when spring comes around. I want to feel lean, but that's not always sustainable. So I think my body, longevity wise, has really come to adapt this cycle, and it also kind of works with the season as well.
100%. And I feel like me personally, I still stay in that cycle now, even though I've retired and even though I'm not competing, and trying to get, the general public to understand that, girl, like, we're not supposed to be snatched all year round. If you have an aim or if you have a goal, focus on being the best you can be, for 3 months a year, and then understand that the next year is about how you regenerate, how you build more muscle mass, how you build new muscle tissue. Because I think that there's this really unrealistic kind of expectation of us to just constantly be looking and feeling our best. And we've talked about this, very briefly today, that, there's a lot of change going on in the world of fitness. And I think that if I can say, I feel like we're almost going backwards a little bit. If you think about the early 90s, there was such a huge obsession with being skinny. I feel like that's really returned, in the media very recently. What would be your advice to women who are feeling the pressures of having to look or conform to a certain appearance or a certain look, or that's, currently prevalent?
I would say, for one, be forgiving to yourself. And if this is something that is super important to you, let's set out a goal. Let's map it out on a calendar, and let's mark it. Let's catalog it to see how we can build change. As an athlete, we have dietary structures, we have training structures in place because we want to peak at that exact moment. But that is not a sustainable moment, as you're saying. Like, we can't be our most powerful, our strongest, our fastest, 12 months of the year. We are peaking to try to get that window down to 6 to 12 weeks so we can keep that bout going and competing. And then we have to start from scratch and build all up again, because if we keep skipping those steps, we'll find ourselves getting injured. So what I've also noticed as I've become a more seasoned athlete,
go on,
and being female and looking into more of the women's fitness and understanding your cycle. We also, there's so many women on birth control, and that it can be suppressing hormones that just changes the types of hormones that we're dealing with. And actually, in my 30s, did I start to see a huge change in my body and how it was responding to those types of hormones.
Absolutely. And I actually came off the pill in my 30s.
It was kind of having very negative effects on me, and taking a break or trying other things was making me really have to step back and understand what was happening in my body.
What symptoms were you getting?
I was just getting a lot of breakthrough bleeding, or highly emotional. I was heading up to the mountain, getting ready to snowboard, and just bursting into tears, and being with all the guys on my team. They're like, "What is wrong with you?" I'm like, "I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm really excited. We're gonna have some powder. We're gonna have so much fun." And they're like, "Why are you crying?" I'm like, "I honestly don't know. Just sitting there." But it felt good to cry. And I don't know. I think women also in sports, we are trained to function almost like men. At least I was, in how I kind of came up in my sport, because it was very male dominated. And I felt like my body in its 30s were like, you thought we were going to let you continue with this pattern? That's funny, Lindsay. No, not at all. So over the last, I would say, 8 years, I started really looking into it, and probably even the most recently, within the last 4 years, did I start understanding my cycle, not just my cycle, my period, the actual full cycle and all the moments in between. And even just yesterday, I was like, gosh, I feel sluggish. I feel a little, I just don't feel myself. I feel just my clothes don't fit me right. And I'm just oh my gosh, my first reaction is oh my gosh, I'm gaining weight. Did I not eat right? I start to dissect that. And then I'm like, let me see where I am in my cycle for a second and look and check in with that first and the symptoms that are usually associated with that. I'm like, okay, for one, all right. So I know that I'm in a type of moment that I'm not going to be feeling my best in that buildup. And I could recognize that. And then it's like, okay, another thing I could do to try to help improve my hormones is maybe do some meditation or make sure I'm drinking enough water and see if I feel better. And just that and making sure I got enough sleep, I woke up feeling a lot better today. And I'm feeling like, in my own skin. But that happens like changes daily for women sometimes. And it's kind of BS. We got the short end of the stick on that one. Like, I mean, men don't really understand. And I try to like educate the younger guys on our team, like what women actually go through. And some are receptive and they're like, that doesn't sound fun. I'm like, it's not. It's not. Fun.
And on top of that, I have to do the same work that you have to do.
Exactly. And I'm expected to do the same and do it with a smile.
Exactly. And it's a great smile you have, Lindsey.
Thank you.
Linz, I just want to say a massive thank you for slaying with us and remind us when the book is out, Unforgiving, and where can we find it?
Unforgiving is coming out October 17th, but it is actually available for pre-order right now. You go to Amazon, Barnes & Nobles. You can just definitely click the link on my Instagram bio. There's a couple links there, or just search Unforgiving. It will pop up on Amazon. We all love Amazon, so it pops up pretty easy there.
I love Amazon. Eric, not so much because his card's linked to the account. But
that's
Lindsey,
fair. That's why you really like it. You're like, no.
Exactly. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on. One last question. Will there be another Olympics for you?
As of right now, it's not a part of my journey. I don't want to say no, but it's there's other things I want to explore, and I feel like I have that fire, and I want to see what momentum I get with this book and what opportunities, kind of like how I fell into NASM and what other opportunities we made. We made so many great connections with those wonderful people, and who knows what lies next. I don't want to just limit myself to the snowboard industry. I'm still planning on competing this year and taking 1 year at a time. And that's actually been my motto after every Olympics. I was not thinking I was ever doing 5 Olympics, by the way. I was like, we'll see how it is. And then just time goes by so fast. So who knows? All of a sudden we'll be like, oh my gosh, there's another Olympics. And I'm still here. I don't know. I don't know if my body will hold up.
For some reason, I'm not going to rule it out. But for now, for those of you who, don't know the full story, want to know more about Lindsey and her story, make sure you head out and get your copy of Unforgiving. And I genuinely feel like this needs to be turned into like a Hollywood movie, because for me, it's been amazing to watch you, amazing to be able to watch and understand as a friend just what a tough road it's been, but also what a freaking victory. I'm so happy for you.
It felt pretty incredible when it happened. And I needed to actually do that big turn at the bottom just to kind of get away from everyone and not be immediately into the media pit, because I kind of needed to process what just happened.
Guys, that concludes this episode of Say. Stay tuned for more empowering discussions on health and fitness. You can follow me at Louise Hazel. You can follow Lindsey at
Lindsey Jacobellis.
And you can follow our Slay brand at Slay Athletic. If you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on Spotify. And if you want to join us and slay at home, then you can download the Slay app for free and join our online community. Thank you so much for coming on, Lindsey.
Thank you, Lou.